Okay, so got a new little tool, and it's a podcast mic. Someone at the office got it. I'm like, if you're not using it, I'm gonna give it a run. Try to bring you more of these. Like I said, we'll talk about mortgage. I think AI is an interesting conversation. I use it every day, and I'll try to show you some of the tricks that I do. There's so many ways to use it, and they're growing day by day, right? But today on the mortgage side, or just general financial, we're going to talk about, market crashes. Are we due for one? Is one coming? What did the last one look like? Is anything moving us forward to something like that? My opinion of 2008, if you watch The Big Short, I think pretty good description of what happened. You had a lot of people buying derivatives of bad paper, so I'm sure that's happening in some markets. I don't think it's happening in the housing market. I think a lot of the regulations they put in place are going to make that harder. Makes buying a house harder sometimes, maybe, but at the end of the day, if we can keep the housing market kind of fluid, that would be nice. In Arizona here, prices are kind of high. I think our average here in Maricopa County is 450, which isn't crazy, but in that 6.5% market, give or take, 450 looks like $3,200 payment, assuming minimum down. So are we headed for a market crash? I don't think so. Not on the housing side. I think we may have a little bit of an economic turn down, maybe. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with some of the global stuff in Ukraine and Iran. Hopefully that gets tidied up sooner than later. We've just had the Fed chair replacement, or that's coming here this month, so we're going to see some ripple effect from that. Most of the time when folks come into a position like that, they want to make a change. The president, the current president, he's all about making big splashy changes. So if the Fed chair is looking to move the needle a little bit, maybe take a market turn down as far as reduce rates, what happens is the Federal Reserve reduces rates, and it kind of reduces rates all across the board. I think the biggest sector that feels it is when rates go down is the business sector, because they can borrow money cheap. If you're a large land developer, or if you're looking to build a building or something like that, borrowing $20 million at 4% is way better than 6%. What are the terms? All these economic conditions make a difference. And if we do have a market turn down, you're going to see, generally you'll see a uptick in unemployment. And then so unemployment goes up, Federal Reserve lowers rates to try to stimulate business, and so then the cycle continues. Somewhere in there, the housing market's going to benefit. A lot of folks, if you bought a house in the last 2 years, you're probably somewhere between 6 and 6.5, maybe a little higher, unless you bought your rate down. And rate buy downs are compelling, but if you're looking online anywhere at rates, you're going to see in little baby numbers, it's going to say what that costs to get that rate. And normally it's about 2%, so if you're buying a $600,000 house and whatever site you're on says 5.9 or 6.25 or 5.3 or whatever it is, look for discount points. That's what they're called. They might call them origination charges, but generally it's about 2%. So the question is, say you could get, say you could get a 6.5, wouldn't cost you anything. Or you can pay 2% on a $600,000 house, which would be about 12 grand. How long does it take to get that back? And if rates come down the next year, could you have gotten that 5.75% or whatever rate you got? Could you have gotten that for free? So these things to think about. Home buying is a strategic experience. It is the dream home, and everybody has to have a place to live, and you want to love the place you live, and it's a huge expense and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, it's just part of your overall financial strategy. And potential of a market crash has to be as well. Are you into crypto? Are you into gold? What are you doing with your additional funds? Do you have additional funds? If not, is there a way to get more? All these questions come up, and they do come up, believe it or not, in the day-to-day should I, can I, would I buy a house conversation. Because again, this is where most people's largest expense is. Whether you're renting or buying, you're shelling out money to live. And if there's a way to maximize that, or reduce that in a way that's going to put your other financial experience into a better situation, I think that's something to talk about. But mostly today, wanted to test out this new podcast mic and hope it sounds good. We're going to bring some more stuff to you here in the near future, and hopefully some cool people and good stuff like that. But in the meantime, if you have questions, want to just kind of run through some finances, see where your credit is, anything that loosely relates to housing, I got you. Hope you have a good one, and we'll see you next time.